mute as often as possible, just so I don't unintentionally laugh over someone.
I think we're live. Hello, everyone. We're live.
Look at that.
Hey, guys.
All right. So we have the panel for Romance and LitRPG. Sorry, I had a brain freeze there. So let's go around and introduce everybody for a second. We'll start with Daniel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Schinhofen. I've been a writer in the LitRPG community for over 6 years now. All of my books include some form of romance. Nope, I take it back. There was one book where there was absolutely no romance. So 1 out of 42 of romance, 41 with romance. So this is something I've touched on a lot, and sometimes multiple times in the same book. So it should be interesting.
I can't believe I'm in between Daniel and Sean for this part.
Don't worry, you'll get used to it.
Yeah, it is the panel for it, I suppose. I am Brian. I used to write under James Northman over on Royal Road, where I've been for the last 2 years with a series called Wildcards, The Dread Pirate, which got to the number 7 on Royal Road before being yeeted into oblivion. But I've been working on that for the last while. I got a deal for a trilogy, but working on a side project, which is really, really fun at the moment, that I'm hoping to self-publish later in the year.
Yay!
Okay, I'm Sean Oswald. I started writing my first book as personal therapy in May of 2019. And published that book then in April of 2020. It had romance in it, the most forbidden of romances between a husband and wife. But all of my books have some element of romance, and as Daniel said, some of them have more than one romance. So
awesome.
Very nice. My name's Jess, JD Astros, what I publish under. I've been writing for about 7-8 years, writing LitRPG for about 5. All of my stories include some kind of romance, whether it's like very small flirting or like full-blown sex scenes that happen off screen because we don't publish that. And I'm actually moving further into the romance genre later next year. I'm really excited for that.
Awesome.
Hi, my name is Ta Wong. I write a whole bunch of series, some of which include what I like to call real-life romances, as in actual relationships that have breakups and up and down turns. I also have written a romantic comedy with my co-author A.G. Marshall called Leveled Up Love, and it's part of the reason why I'm part of this group.
My name is JD, and let's get this out of the way. That is not a pen name. That's my actual last name. JD Glasscock. I was born with the name. It's my name. My background, I've been writing for 30 years, but my background is poetry, lyrics, music, and film, indie film. And then I had an epiphany 5 months ago, and I had been reading LitRPG nonstop for 8 months prior to that. And I had an epiphany of why don't I actually write stuff that actually could procure some money coming in? And so I decided to take the leap into writing novels. And that's where I'm at now. The first 2 books of Blood Brothers is out. But as far as that romance, I mean, it's I think it's integral to any good story, whatever form it takes. But it's definitely a vehicle for showing depth of emotion.
Okay. So how difficult is it to come up with some of the situations that you guys write about in your books?
Sex situations, or
I mean, any of them.
what are we talking about here?
How do you make it?
JD went right there. She's like, sex.
Yeah.
You talking about
How
sex?
do you make
What are we
it
talking about?
track naturally? It's hard because a lot of times you read books and you see them, they really feel forced or fabricated? It's you know, how do you make it a little more natural feeling or
Believable romance.
yeah, there you go.
For me, it's very simple. I've lived with multiple girlfriends for most of my adult life, having been in poly relationships. So writing harem, which is what I'm well known for, which involves having multiple partners, is something that I can just draw on from having lived in such a situation long enough. Unlike Tao, though, my books normally don't dwell with some of the things he's touched on, breakups and the angst that can come from romance in general, because I try to at least make them happy, fun romances and not, oh my God, why do I have to read this while I'm going through the most heinous divorce of my life?
Yeah.
I was actually talking to a bunch of romance authors. I wanted recently, and one of the things that they talked about was the 12 laws of intimacy. And if you look into that, it has a very gradated series of touch points of, you know, how someone is attracted to other people. And so if you use that as a guideline, it can make the attraction or the craft, you know, when you're writing it, much more organic looking. You just have to be careful.
Yeah.
You know, I think some of that, though, comes down to what genre this is. In LitRPG, we are, and I'm going to broad stroke this, but there's an element of power fantasy in what we do. And because there is, there's an element of power fantasy even in the romance. The type of books that I write, the type of books that Dan write, I call them romance for men sometimes because they want a level of security. They don't want the fear of betrayal. That's what the audience speaks to about those subjects all the time. And it's just like you don't want your main character to suddenly lose half his levels. By the same token, they don't want to see this great deal of loss. And if there is loss, it generally needs to be in a controlled environment where it's not dwelled on for too long, and you risk some of your audience if you do it otherwise. Maybe some of us would like to do more of that in depth, but at the end of the day, LitRPG is kind of a happy genre in broad strokes.
As far as believability of romance, it kind of depends on where you are or where you're referencing. If you're talking about the beginning, burgeoning aspects of a romantic diadem, or the middle where they've been together for a few years, or as Tao was talking about, whether they're at a breakup part or any of those other things. In the beginning, though, it's all about, and I think it's a beautiful tool to bring readers into actually connecting with your characters and seeing them as real. But it's like anything else in real life. The more you make it real and depict it as something that really happens, then I think the more beautiful of a tool it is and the more powerful it is. But like when you first start meeting someone, it's like with a slow touch, with a flirting, with the nervous energy of putting yourself out there but not knowing how it's going to be received, and the small things, you know what I mean? I mean, I think all great things are just a bunch of small things put together. So I think it's the details that can create that believability.
For myself, I suppose I should caveat this with, I've forgotten the introduction part, but before I started LitRPG, I wrote erotica for years as a woman. And when they used to have the rankings of authors, at one point in time, I was the 13th most popular paranormal erotica author in Japan, which I immediately told my parents, and they thought that was hilarious. And then they told my
especially with that deep voice, man.
Yeah, no, they don't know. Like, they all think I'm a woman, so it's fantastic. That has one eye. She lost one eye in a phallic incident of 2006 that she doesn't like to talk about. And I get fan art of her. It's wonderful. Anyway, with making things natural, I suppose one of the first things is depth. I think that once you are creating a union between two people, you need to be able to create someone that is believable, not just an object of desire. So I tend to write my characters as female, or the same way I write my males, in that they are filled with depth, their personality, their everything. and that they're not just some mindless kind of drone to be achieved or anything like this, in that it's worked for, in that they have their own motivations, their own backgrounds, their own trials and tribulations, and how those two people come together and work with that, chipping away at things and gaining that familiarity, and eventually blossoming into something potentially more, usually friends to lovers, or enemies to lovers. There's so many ways to do it.
Sweet.
I think that's, I mean, Sean touched on the point that I think is really important. I mean, especially as me, so having written romance for women before, transitioning now to a space where LitRPG is predominantly male, trying to write a romance that is believable in that way, like I've really had to scramble my brains to get that way. Fortunately, I had some really good alpha readers who called out some specific sections that were just like, men don't think like this, stop it. And I was like, oh, okay. I rewrote the scene, and it was much better. It was very on point, so I felt pretty good about that. But definitely believable romance is trust and friendship. I think those are the foundations, trust and friendship. Whether you're writing harem or like a single love interest, or the ups and downs with breakups, like it comes into play with breakups too, right? If you lose trust, you lose friendship, then you're going to probably lose that relationship. So trust and friendship.
Okay, so Yoshi has a question. So as authors, how does it feel knowing thousands of people have gotten horny because of something you wrote?
Wash your socks.
Can I just jump in on this one?
Sure, go for it.
So I had to stop writing erotica because of the dick pics on Twitter. So I actually created a feedback loop where they all sent me dick pics, and then I'd send them back the collection that I'd already received, and then they were emasculated, or I don't know. But it was getting to the point where I needed to just remove myself from that.
Or just turn on your audio and like show them your deep, dark, heavy voice, and then they'd be like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, just like, what do you sound like? Just like, I'm your worst nightmare, love. And it's like
somebody out there would enjoy it.
You know, someone might be okay with that.
Maybe so, but probably not those readers. But
they're looking for the one-eyed woman.
Happy surprise.
So yeah,
I'll jump into the science. I would probably say I have more of that kind of interaction in my films than so far in my books, obviously, because I've only had books out for 4 months. But I think it correlates. I don't know. I don't know about everyone else, but I'm pretty sure they're all like that. When you write for the story you're telling. How it affects others is more the when it's done, and you know, you hope for it to affect them in one way or another. If you're writing erotica or if you're writing romance, then that's how you are hoping that it does affect them. I give them cheers, kudos, man. Go get to it. Get your significant other and get the horny on.
We got a question for Jess here from Facebook user. Don't forget our Streamlabs link if you want to get shouted out. Do you think more women would be drawn to LitRPG if there's a greater romance relationship component?
So, I mean, you can talk with Shadowlight Press about it. I've talked with them about it a lot. Like, I love the LitRPG genre. I think it's fantastic. I've loved video games all my life, and the marrying of literature and video game components was just like so on point for me. But I know that my writing style, especially when it comes to romance, is much more in line with what women want to read. So it's been sort of heart-wrenching for me to live this experience of like I'm trying to produce in two different mindsets, one that's targeted more at male readers and one that's targeted more at females, and kind of trying to meet in the middle. I think I did the best I could with my very last series, but I would love to see more women come into the genre. That's kind of been my goal the whole time. I've talked about it many times that I really, I mean, I love what I write. I just wish more people would love what I write.
Can I jump in on this as well?
Sure.
I was going to say that I don't think traditional romance readers are looking for what we are writing in terms of the lit RPG element specifically. What they want is more, it's the romance aspect, really. And the lit RPG elements, really, I think, almost gets in the way of that because there's so much explaining we have to do with the system. I think there is definitely a female market for female gamers, and I think they would be willing to read more books that aren't as targeted towards males. And I think there is definitely a market for that. It's just a question of trying to get them and find them, which is the difficulty that Jess has had, that I've had to some extent, even with my female co-authors, with Katie and stuff like that. It's hard.
So if I could,
Jess, I'm going to go grab one of your books.
So if I can add something there, I'd say first off, with regard to life in exile, with where the first romance is a married couple, and then there's romances that as their children are growing up and finding their loves. I have a pretty significant number of female readers that comment about it and who like that component. So I think there is some market to it. I'll also say that two of my beta readers for Prism Academy, which is a David Burke book, are women, and they provide me with meaningful feedback with regard to, how that works. So
I think the bigger thing here is like females make up 73% of the market when it comes to reading books, but that's not true at all of LitRPG. And so something that's happening within this genre is like not letting women flow into the genre. And it could be a romantic element, or it could be that primarily it's written from male perspectives for men. And that could be a stopping point for them.
It could also be that there are too many authors, I guess, maybe are surface swimming on the romantic side, or things that would pull more women in, the heavy emotional side, or not quite sure.
I actually got a feedback on one of my 0 Point Hero is my 4 college girls Sailor Moon style D&D, like transform into their D&D characters to fight slimes. And one of my reviews from Ramon was that there's too many female emotions. and so I think that was like a really hilarious moment for me, into thinking like, well, I really better just like turn off that female emotion side of my brain and start writing for men.
I don't know. I think you should do you, is what I think.
Yeah. Sharon asks, have you had any really bad romances and use them as an example of what not to do?
I plead the fifth.
I can honestly say no. I can't think of any bad romances in my life. I've had very good relationships with everyone I've had in my life. The few breakups I've had have been amiable just for the fact that we've had different goals to go towards.
Yeah.
So I've been married since I was 20, almost 30 years of marriage now. I dated a couple girls beforehand, but boom, 9 kids, 30 years of marriage, boom. But I think the question actually was, have you read any bad romances? And I will say that I read some of the Harlequin romance novels that my mom had when I was, a kid. And I was just wanted to read something, anything, picked them up, and I was like, what is this? So.
You picked up the old bodice rippers?
Yep.
Wow. Brave man.
Well, I mean, I've been single for 20 years. So I don't know if I'd remember. But yeah, there's a lot of great books with great romance. I just finished Daniel's Alpha World, the last book, like 3 days ago. It is harem, I guess, in a sense, but the whole book is dynamic around actual love, actual emotions, real emotions, complex emotions, and actually caring about whether it be multiple partners or not. It was still everyone caring about each other.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a certain quality and especially view for that setting. I mean, you got your harem novels that are just, I mean, they are what they are. And then you've got your harem novels that are done very well, that have a lot of respect, a lot of great views on it and everything. It's just according to, I guess, what you look for in that. Jeffrey has a question: is world story driven versus more character driven romance versus, just plain lit RPG?
Can you repeat that?
World story driven versus more character driven romance versus lit RPG.
So can I jump in on this?
Sure, yeah.
So this is an interesting one because I was having a conversation today because the current story I'm writing at the moment, progression, fantasy, sci-fi, university. I wanted to take Hogwarts, but I wanted it university, whole curriculum, superheroes fighting demonic portals. I was like, banter, this will be fun. But the thing is that I was like, wait, am I accidentally falling into the urban fantasy realm? And then they're like, no, you're not working in urban fantasy because you're missing all of these tropes. And then I thought, but it's urban and there are fantasy elements. And when I thought of like, oh, I look at urban fantasy and I see all these academy books. And I'm like, oh my God, I want to write an academy story. And they're like, absolutely fucking not, Brian. Like, you do not understand what you're doing. Get away from here. So I was like, okay. When I said get away from here, I didn't mean it. Like, so, but I guess with it, I think that the world building in these things, like if you even draw back to what Jess was saying about, bringing in more female readerships, the readers are there. They're just on a different plane. They're just that, and to transition over, I don't think necessarily, is it going to be lit RPG? It might be game lit. Is it something that has more urban feel to it? Does it have shifter romance? We can write werewolves. We can have all of these things. We can have enemies to lovers. Like when you have someone like Daniel who's able to write all of these polyamorous relationships in incredible depth, like you are able to make that bridge, but it just means acknowledging that those bridges exist rather than this is how we write, this is how we do it. You have to come to us. We need to create that bridge to be able to say, hey, this could be a good transition towards this. This could be a good starter element. So the way I'm hoping to achieve that is with a university, lots of sex. But I'm doing it fade to black for the moment. We'll see on Patreon. But so it's again to see that thing that will it be able to bring me people over. And just the feedback I've been getting so far has been world is that they're absolutely loving the world and they're loving the characters. So I don't think there's necessarily a divide between world versus characters. I think that they can really exist in harmony, and that is the crux of a successful story, I believe.
And I agree with Brian. What I was going to say is that question was kind of erroneous to begin with within it, of trying to say left or right. I think you can do all of the above in a good story.
Kyle asks, how do you write romance without it turning into a harem? Nothing wrong with harem. I'm just curious if there's a point that you stop at in order to keep a book from turning into a harem book.
Yes.
Before any of the actual harem writers speak, I think it's super easy. It's like, I mean, harem has very specific tropes. It requires that all of the characters involved have a mutual understanding of consent and all kinds of things. Like harem is more complex than writing a single love interest romance. Way more complex.
I appreciate that, Jess. I really do. But the answer is very simple. Stop at one love interest, and then you won't end up with harem because you won't end up with
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say I appreciate that attitude too, because the most daunting thing sometimes can be to maintain meaningful relationships, and the same would be true in real life. I'll equate it because my experience is different than Daniel's, but I'll equate it to being a parent. How do you maintain a relationship with multiple children? You don't stop loving one because but it takes time that you spend time with each of your kids. So in the same way you build that up. when you're writing a harem novel, you have to spend time building each of those relationships up. Obviously, it's a different kind of relationship, but
I hope
time time spent for relationships is time spent for relationships.
Seriously, I really appreciate well done harems where the women are dynamic and deep and have their own desires and interests, and the male respects that and tries to help them achieve that. Like, I think those are fantastic. But there have been so many that are not that has turned me off to the harem genre. It's difficult.
It's because the term harem, like LitRPG, is such a broad umbrella that you have a wide scope of popcorn alpha fantasy to, oh my god, relationships that matter and let's understand each other.
Me and Danny, you were just talking about. Me and you were just talking about that in your takeover. About his was the only harem I've been able to get into because of there's actual genuine emotions and it's not just lack of world building. So let's throw a bunch of sex.
Is that a hamster?
I'm cut to the quick, JD.
Nope, that's the.
Oh, there it is.
Okay.
Mr. Lizard.
It's gecko or lizard, something like that.
Definitely. You definitely have to have a balance for sure in your worlds. John Klein wants to know, how do you weave in the explicit content to avoid getting exiled into erotica? Asking for a friend.
I don't think you have to. I mean, a lot of us write fade to black. Not all, obviously, Daniel, but romance doesn't mean sex, right? Romance is everything up to the sex. The sex can be part of the romance, but it doesn't have to be. So if that's a real concern for you, or you're just not comfortable writing sex, fade to black. It's a skill set, definitely, writing it. Good sex scenes.
Writing good sex scenes is difficult. Sex scenes and combat scenes have a lot in common, folks. They both have very limited words to describe repetitive actions over and over again, as my editors have told me repeatedly, as they then change the words to make them not as repetitive over and over again. So, but Tal's right. Romance is it's everything. It's the first date, the first kiss, going out and understanding what the other person wants in life. That is all of romance, not just the coupling that comes that most people think of it. So writing fade to black is totally feasible, just depending on who your audience is and what you're trying to accomplish.
Just to add on, I'm sorry, Brian, go ahead.
Oh, no, of course. No, go on.
I just to add one thing on Daniel's comparison of those two types of scenes. They also involve positioning of where everyone is. And when that's done poorly, oh my goodness, all you can do is laugh, whether it's combat or something else.
The human body doesn't bend 90 degrees backwards. So yeah.
There's a few series that I got halfway through the first book and I was like, I can't do it, man. And it's usually because of combat was like so horribly bad or the other we just referenced.
So one of the things in just kind of subverting expectations as well, in a lot of stories, the romance is the chase all the way to get to the partner and to consummate and to have that experience. When writing University, they had a fling. It already happened before they got to know each other. So the romance, where the stakes have been removed, it's actually getting to know the person beyond those things. And that's where a real deep and meaningful thing could happen, where it's like, how do you navigate the perceptions? How do they see me after this experience versus like, is this more meaningful, or should I have not this, not have done that, X, Y, and Z? There's so many things at play, and it's so nuanced, so many different areas. There's no one answer.
Jesse wants to know, how do you determine the personality you want to use for your characters so the relationships actually work?
Well, there's many different ways relationships can work. that's a really interesting question. I mean, like, to probably put anyone of similar age, background, interests in the same room together and make a relationship work for 4 months, 2 months, 10 years. It depends on your goals. Like, what do you want for these characters? Where are they going? I mean, it's more important that they are who they are outside of the relationship than how to jam 2 puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, I think you create the character first, then you're worried about, I mean, then the romantic side of it comes after that. I don't know if you're creating characters specifically to complement each other.
I think part of that would be also how you build the interactions between that, because I think the question is, how do you make the relationships seem organic? And I think we covered that in many ways. And the first part, it's partly our job as writers to build that connection and that chemistry and make that connection and chemistry real for you as the reader. Part of that is making sure that there's trust, there's reasons for them to like each other, but also in specific steps that you can show, okay, well, the person now notices them. Hey, this is the first time they touch one another. How does that look? How does that feel? How do the people react to it? If you brush past those instances and then jump straight into suddenly they're kissing one another, it feels off for the reader. And that's when, you don't see it. But if you build those instances in, then it doesn't matter as much with the personalities, unless, obviously there's like, mass murderer, pacifists, that, might be an issue.
And
That
now I
is
have to build that romance.
uncaring.
Go ahead, Danny.
I was just saying that sounds almost like a challenge from Tao. I'm almost tempted to build the
Yeah,
pacifist
Daniel's
mass
like off to
murderer
write
romance, just to
a
be
mass
like,
murderer.
really can't do it.
But
I didn't
who's
say
gonna
I can't do it. I'm just saying it might be a
who's gonna have to turn, right? The mass murderer or the pacifist?
Who says they have to turn? Maybe they just come to
Daniel's next
accept each
novel
other.
soon.
I had a staff sergeant once tell me that the best relationships are built on shared experiences. Now, he wasn't talking about romance, but sometimes it's just the experiences that the characters undergo together that puts them together. It's not that their personalities were designed to mesh. We don't get to pick out the exact personalities of the people that we're going to be with in real life. And at best, we get to see part of it up front, and then we learn about it over time. Well, the same thing is going to happen with your characters. So it's a little bit about what they experience together.
Just one of the things is that I know that from a lot of my friends within the romance community, romance writers community, they would be using enneagrams to come up with the different numerics of the conflicting personality types. Now, whilst I do think that is really cool, for me personally, I like to add a few different love interests of sorts, some that challenge the primary character, and then others that are almost like the found family that address their insecurities, that are able to kind of see them for who they are, and like, you are enough as is, and things like that, because then it's is this the person that I want to, get to the next stage, or just to stay as I am and be appreciated, and things like that, where you're like, who do you go for? And those sort of reader expectations and things, I think it works for the personalities, but they have to be fleshed out. So.
Well, and like what Tao was saying, I mean, wouldn't you agree, Tao, though, like all your stuff you were referencing changes based on the 2 personalities you're dealing with? How someone touched someone, how someone flirted with someone. It's totally dependent on the 2
It has to be organic
characters.
in the way that you write it.
Yeah.
So I think maybe where we've gotten to is the base of this question is, if the romance is the most important part of this story, then the characters must have interesting ways that they interact with each other to create that romance. If the romance is not the primary part of this story, then it doesn't matter. You put the 2 characters together, they go through the experiences together, the relationship comes out how it's going to come out from what they've experienced, because the story is the primary component.
Okay, so Kyle wants to know what drives you guys to write romance and harem.
So just on that question, it doesn't mean that it's going to be considered harem. So for me, for example, when I introduced like more than 2 characters, Royal Road is like harem, and then fucking yeets the story out the window. And I'm like, no, platonic. And they're like, no, you introduced attractive women. And I was like, I never stated that. And then they were like,
you implied she was attractive, man. It wasn't.
I mean, some of that's Royal Road, though. I mean, there's like a shit ton of trolls.
I gave them a fucking pronoun, and you filled in the fucking blanks, mate. Okay, so like I am Soz. But anyway, so it doesn't necessarily what your intention of the story is. Like it won't be categorized as harem unless you go into the tropes and you write it as a harem. No one accidentally falls into harem, and if they do, it means, it means they should be writing harem.
So, I mean, otherwise it's love triangle or a why choose situation, not harem.
I would like to point out, for somebody who's fallen into harem in real life, I then did write harem. So thank you very much, Brian.
It is important to note that lots of people can accidentally read harem, though.
You mean act in their private moments so that no one else knows? Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, they say that they accidentally read it, and
I accidentally read the whole 10-book series. Oops. I had no idea the whole time that it was a harem.
Me and Daniel were talking about earlier. I had a review on book 2. There's like a sprite in my book 2, Melody Twinklebottom, that likes to graphically talk about sex. And I had this lady say, I had high hopes for this author, but he made his book unclean, talking about sex. I'm like, unclean. I'm like, what? Are we in the Middle Ages? Like, did someone just literally use that word? Unclean. I'm like,
Get the flamers,
wow.
brother. Heresy has happened.
I mean, that is a concern for some people. Like, I know there are some readers that really don't enjoy having graphic sex or graphic violence or graphic language in their LitRPG, and they can find LitRPG out there that hits those notes for them. So, I mean, it's all about people's preference. Not everybody likes peaches. Not everybody likes peaches. That's the way it is.
There's a joke in there somewhere, I'm sure. Can any of you speak to how you deal with conflict pertaining specifically to romance? JD asks.
Are we talking about the 2 partners in the romance not getting along? In that case, I would say you take the standard steps you would take when you're disagreeing with your significant other at home. If it's a good relationship, you stop, you talk it out, you work through whys and hows and come up with solutions. And if you don't have a good relationship at home and you're going through those, then you're probably yelling and screaming and possibly throwing things at each other. So, I mean, it should follow the same basic routes that most life does, because romance in a way should at least quasi resemble life.
Yeah, good writing to me is exactly what he just said. A good writing is really writing stuff that people can relate to, because it's real interactions with characters that have been built to be real, just like real people in real life.
I mean, it depends also on, to some extent, on what you're trying to write about, right? Leveled Up Love is a comedy, so I take, then you have those comedy tropes that you're playing with, where people don't necessarily talk to one another, or they talk to one another, but then they get interrupted halfway through the conversation because something else happens, and so all the information doesn't get played out. And you can play with things like that, but that's because it's a comedy. That's what it is. It's a romantic comedy. That's what we're going for. In System Apocalypse, I write some somewhat more realistic relationships. And John has issues. He is not a good partner. And so, things go to hell in his relationships because that's what he is. He's just horrible as a partner. But that's partly, it's an apocalypse. People are not processing emotions very well, or they're processing other more important emotions about the fact that they, walked through a mass murder site.
The world is ending.
Yeah, so you have to play around with it. Daniel's work is much more nice. His relationships work out, and that's the theme of and the goal of his books, right? Harem stuff will be very much more. You will have to work it out. You can't have them not work it out because it's meant to be a harem, unless it's someone that you intend for them to lose, and that goes true.
Just one of the things on that as well is that if you are just looking at the kind of the conflict between two individuals, as in the love interest, or sorry, how many love interests there may be, I sometimes like to take a step outside of that and introduce, in my most recent story, is Victoria, and she's a cockblock. And she essentially likes the main character. He has no interest in her. And she's like, well, I'm much smarter than you. And she is essentially Moriarty. She is so fucking good at making everything line up to cockblock him. And it is like, that is conflict, because they're like, oh, like, I can't believe the main character did this, or he didn't do this, or he didn't do that. Oh, it's all the machinations of Victoria. And he's like, what's going on? So he's trying his absolute best, but there's someone in his way. And that, I think, is a fun dynamic, because you can still have a competent main character who is trying his best, is able to have healthy relationships and talk through things. But when he has someone that is an adversary at that level, that can create an incredible conflict.
In the background.
Always.
Again, I had a conflict in Life in Exile with the husband and wife. They're like we like each other, but we don't really feel the love. And then suddenly they're in a new world with their 3 kids where monsters are trying to eat their faces off. So sort of like Tao said, there's that trauma. How are you going to process this? And the wife does not want to process it. She does not want to accept that there's new rules to reality, and she wants to blame her husband for that. And they really have to work through that conflict. Like he intentionally somehow made it so they came to this other world, but because he likes video games, it was, anyway. So it's the point is that their conflict helped the decisions they made. Are we going to stay in this town? Are we going to keep exploring? What are we going to let our kids do? What are we not going to let our kids do? No, you're not going to let our kids fight monsters. Well, wait a minute. They have to get stronger. No, that's not how, and so there's that back and forth in between them. And honestly, I got so much hatred for that character, the wife, for quite a while. And then people ended up liking her towards the end because she had come around and she grew as a person. And that sort of conflict allows for the characters to grow.
Okay. Dave wants to know, have you guys ever had an MC that you wanted to slap upside the head?
Yeah. We all have, of course.
I would imagine.
Yeah, for me, it's called a clue by 4. It's a piece of lumber with metal bands that I wish I could use to the back of a main character's head to get them to understand what is going on around them.
So I suppose just to kind of, I would normally say no, but the thing is that I've been writing in things, and my beta reader of sorts has been like, absolutely fucking not. Like, if you do this now, like, then the stakes are all gone for later. And I'm like, oh no, but it's just like they like each other.
Seeing a pattern
absolutely
here
fucking
with your
not.
alpha reader, man, and what he says to you.
Oh no, she's incredible. She's a statistician, and she finds continuity errors and everything. And it's like, oh Brian, the corridor, there was this one door that had this number and this number, and then I was like, how? I mentioned that in passing. Anyway, but she was like, absolutely fucking not. I was like, oh, my MC's an idiot. Never mind. Retract. So I think I need to be slapped across the head, not my MC. So.
I mean, is that something you're looking for?
I'll try and get a booking. I know you're booked out. So.
I definitely got some comments on Royal Road in my most recent story, Deathless Dungeoneers, the very first book. So like that one has a romance that kind of buds over the entire series. Is like the very first one. They're interacting, they're friends, they're kind of working together, going through these shared traumas together. And she states at the outset, like, we're just friends. Like, that's all we're doing here. We're just friends, because she doesn't want to get romantically involved, but it kind of just, like, gravity pulls them together anyways, and it happens. But at one point, she, like, grabs his hand in a big crowd, and he goes, oh, she must not want to get lost, because the crowd is very big and she hasn't been here before. And everyone's just like, bonk! What's he doing? I felt pretty, I mean, like, it was on purpose, but everyone hated it.
Irene has a question: is Harlequin romances are the same story over and over again? Are your romances unique or the same formula?
I think the characters can make any of the same formula unique, in the fact that if they are the ones that are different, it can be the same scenario. As you would say about there's only so much vocabulary you can use for a combat or a sexual encounter, there is only so many formulas you can use, but you can play with the personality types, the scenarios, situations, the events, the timing, all of those different things. So yes, you can use a standardized formula, but you can make it very, very original.
Yeah, I know quite a number of authors who use a standard writing formula. There's a lot of them in Harem who basically check box off as they go through their story. For myself, though, it's always the story. The story goes where it does. The romance happens as it does. So I don't think that any of my romances are exactly the same. Some of them have similar elements, but that's because I write off of things that I've personally experienced. So.
I would agree. I don't set out with a formula in mind, nor do I have any boxes that I want to check, although I am mindful of the community and its expectations, and those are in the back of my head. But really, the characters tell me where they want to go. And I know that's kind of a trite thing to say, but it's just it. I design the character and then I let the character go where they're going to go, and that has led to redemption arcs when I had intended someone to be a villain or villainess. It has led to failed relationships that I had intended to actually work out. So,
and this is also where I disagree. Every time I hear the word "there's nothing new under the sun," I completely disagree. A good artist of whatever vehicle they're using in their art, you can take something that's been done 1,000 times and do it in an original way. So I think if you're good at what you're doing, you're gonna you could do 100 romances and make them all different in some dynamic or some aspect of them.
Yeah, I mean, with Leveled Up Love, I was, in some ways, you can call it a very typical rom-com because it's, silly situations with people with, a couple of love interests involved. But then you throw in the whole system inside there, which is basically an alpha version of a dating app that's taken over his life. And then things start going crazy, So it's, I think, to talk about a formula, the moment you even drag it into LitRPG, things start going haywire anyway, because you don't have that same Harlequin formula running through all our books anyway. Just because we've got some weird systems happening.
I think Brian just wrote like something that needs an Oscar, man. I mean, it's insanely talented.
Sorry, Tal. I didn't mean to laugh while you were talking.
I'm so sorry about that. I didn't mean to overstep, Evan, but I did read the J.D. Jarrison's. Do you have a favorite simile, metaphor, or other piece of figurative language that you've used to describe romantic situations in your books? I wasn't going to actually answer this because I didn't have a serious one, and I may have said into the private chat, she breasted boobily down the stairs, which is my favorite.
That one's been around for a while. It's still very badly written and still makes me laugh.
It still makes me laugh.
You guys, you have to forgive me. We have storms, so Lola's freaking out, and I'm trying to do this while dealing with a dog that's shaking like a leaf.
Gotcha. So does anybody have any upcoming or current books they would like to talk about right now? I know everybody's always writing, so it's hard for me to keep up.
Tal, you'll have to send me a link to that romantic comedy. I would love to check it out.
It's Leveled Up Love.
Leveled
That's
Up
the
Love?
name. Yep, that's the name.
Gotcha.
It actually has a different cover now because this is the original cover. We've played around with throwing around different covers. At
Oh, it's
some
behind
point,
you.
Yeah, it's the one
Okay,
right
I
behind.
can only see
That's an
the
old cover.
EVEL.
I know, it's all
Evil
messed
Up.
Evil Up. Yay, that's the way we do it.
So David Burke had Tower Mage come out today, which is a LitRPG with multiple love interests. Prism Academy 3 comes out next month. The month after that, Four Laws Book 6 comes out again from David Burke. And towards the end of December, the conclusion of the Class Shift trilogy by Sean Oswald, which is it does have romance and only a singular romance in it. So yeah, basically a book a month.
Sean, calm down. You don't have to publish that much. Calm down, sir. I think most of us who are authors have at least something in the works or coming up. I myself write in a four series rotation, so I have a book coming out every month and a half to 2 months. My next one will be Aether Survival 6, which will probably come out near the end of November. And it is, of course, since I wrote it, a harem.
I think
I have book 3 of Blood
okay.
Brothers coming out at the end of November, Into the Gray. That's going to be a 9-book series. After book 5, probably sometime next year, I'm hitting a book maybe every 2 months, 2.5 months. I'm going to start a second series that's more post-apocalyptic called The Dream, which should be interesting. But unlike these guys, I cannot juggle 5, 6 series all at once. It's not. I would get nothing done if I tried to do that.
It's called Squirrel Brain. You just kind of have to have, a little squirrel in your head going, squirrel, plot.
Now, if I try to write 5 things at a time, I would go insane. This is why I write in a rotation, and I write one book start to finish, and then go to the next book and write start to finish.
No, that's what I'm going to do
otherwise
next year.
I would die.
I'm going to write book 1 of the
It
new
helps
one.
to
And then
be
go to the
insane.
next
It's all good,
What about you, Brian? Anything coming up current?
Yeah, so Deathless Dungeoneers 3 is going to be coming out December 13th, I think. I'm working on the 3rd book in the series for 0 Point Hero, my Sailor Moon style transform into D&D characters book. And I'm also working on a brand new series, which is definitely targeted more at females, but also has a gamelet element. So please wish me luck that this doesn't flop directly onto its face. But that's called Fae Prison Earth. I'm really excited. It's definitely got a lot more romance in it. And I realized how much I really, really enjoy writing more deep romance. Like, I really, really liked it. So I'm definitely on this kick, and I'm thinking about new things in that genre. I'm really excited.
For myself, I am writing Quest Academy. So it is at 110,000 words, which I wrote in 5 weeks. Prior to that, I was writing about 10,000 words a month, thinking, I have a full-time job. This is the best I can do. And when I started this story, it just flowed onto the page, and I've been having so much fun. And
is this the one where your beta reader keeps saying, fuck no?
Yeah. It is, and it's essentially a superhero academy, to fight demonic portals, dungeons, and towers, in a dystopian kind of environment where humanity has been pushed back, and now demons are held back by barriers. We're 3rd generation now since the portal breaks have happened, and the kids have, essence imbued bodies, and it's really, really fun so far. And I have a feeling Sean unmuted himself. Is Prism Academy the exact same story?
I just wanted to say,
did you just say you basically stole his ideas?
I haven't read it, but I just saw him, and I know he's released something called Academy, and I'm like, I need to read Academy stuff.
Superheroes versus monsters in a post-apocalyptic dystopian society. Yeah.
And I just downloaded Jess's Zero Hero, the hero one.
Let me tell you, there's another one though too, called Saving Supervillains by Bruce Centaur, which is like phenomenal. Yeah.
Oh.
So here's the good news. There's a market for it.
Fantastic, because this is the funniest thing. There's like all of the important people and wealthy people, when the demons happened, they were like, yeah, fuck this, nope. And they went up in a fucking, like, they put themselves into space in a colony. And they're like, yeah, when this is sorted, we'll come back. And I called them the Bastion. And I was like, oh, Bastion, there's an academy, this is great. And then Jess in the other, like, panel, she was like, Bastion Academy. And I'm like, oh my fucking God, did I do this? And then when you unmuted, Sean, I'm like, am I just a piece of shit? What do I even do? It's like, you know, sorry.
No, you're definitely not. But I love that you were so excited. Like, seriously, when I started writing Fate Prison Earth and, like, with the more romance elements, like, it flowed onto the page so easily. Like, it was just what I was meant to write. And so I identify with that so much, and I'm so glad that you found that. Like, it's great.
Oh, it's and the beta reader's like, that's not how a course curriculum works. What do you mean by module and what do you mean by course? And I'm like,
and you don't have to act like a one-eyed woman.
I was like, well, I don't know.
Yeah, when you're writing an academy story, you really do have to nail some of the academy things.
I will be lost without her. So I am having a great time.
Brian, yeah, I'd like to point out that, like he said, Bruce Centaur has written that kind of thing. He's written that kind of thing. And I'm sure they're both, those two have gone different ways with it. So I'm sure your story will do the same thing. And as they've said, there is a market for it. So as long as it's good, you should be fine.
Thank you so
much. I would just
much.
put in your blurb, please, no dick pics on Insta.
Oh, actually, sorry, because this is hilarious. I named my other series Wildcards without knowing that George R.R. Martin had a series called Wildcards.
That's what I thought you were alluding to when you first kept saying it.
Not at all. And I'm just a dumbass. It's just really funny. I put in a bidden first, and I was like, that sounds like Abaddon. I was like, fuck you, then it's called Wildcards. I think
that was his first series before Game of Thrones. I think that he had that series going before Game of Thrones.
Google searches before, you know, you land on the final thing. It's kind of useful.
Yeah,
I actually use Amazon searches, not Google searches myself, because if they're a book, they're going to be on Amazon. I have changed series titles because there are 4 other series out there with a similar title. No, I need something that's at least different enough that if it's searched for, it will come up in at least the top 3 of them, and not down buried under 30.
Book out with the title of my first book, except it was like someone like 5 years ago that never wrote another one, and I'm like, fuck it.
So my first series was going to be Tales in Eloria, because Eloria is the name of the world, and like 2 months before we were going to publish it, somebody published Tales in Eloria. So then it became Life in Exile, which is more important. It's better. It's a play on words anyway, so it's you know, worked out better. But
yeah. I was super sad when, like, literally a few weeks before we published Bastion Academy, a series that was just like Bastion came out. And I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me?
I shouldn't have said Quest Academy. Some fuckers out there being like, yoink.
No, I totally haven't locked that up already. It's fine.
Sean actually wrote it during this panel. Just done. I'm sorry to typecast you, Sean.
Not typecast if it's true.
You know, the crazy thing with Prism Academy, I started writing it in 2020, and then people told me that you couldn't do supers and LitRPG together. And what... I guess apparently you can. So
I could point to many successful LitRPG super series and laugh at them.
I didn't know anything. I was so stupid, you know.
Thank you for helping pave the way.
Yeah, thank you.
Are we done?
I think that's it for us. Yeah.
We are pretty much at the end.
Well,
does anybody have anything to
add? Beautiful being on a panel with everyone. So.
Yeah. It's great fun.
I mean, apologies post, but I made so many stroke jokes and peach jokes.
I don't remember any stroke. How did I miss the stroke jokes?
Yeah, I have personally added some books to my TV Red pile because I swear. But so I just want to let everybody know to join us on Discord after the panel, to keep asking questions and to have fun in the after party. Grab a drink or a snack and jump into the live chat. The link should be in the chat somewhere. And you guys should really just join us and just keep it going. Keep it rolling. And
Well,
Pretty,
especially since I
You're a
missed
little
the stroke
sweaty in the
jokes, I
comment.
got to figure out where they went. I don't know. I don't remember them happening, but
You were taking care of a dog.
Someone said
Oh, it's true.
someone said something about like different strokes, and I did this gesture.
Oh, I missed that. But that could have been, yeah, we had storms. Lola could have been leaping all
and it's
over.
recorded, so we'll be able to go back and find.
Oh, yeah.
it.
Be able to go
Yeah.
back and find
Yeah.
Jess making a stroking motion.
This
I'll
was-
It'll be
put it in
clipped out by
slow-mo,
somebody,
and I'll
don't
add
worry.
some War lighting to it.
Oh
So
no, it's going to
everybody
turn into
else-
a GIF now. I'm going to be
Oh, yeah.
GIFified.
You're
Yeah.
going to be
Solidarity, Jess. Nice to meet you.
Everybody else is thinking
Quarter speed,
Kyle
man, quarter
can't
speed.
drink, so he's gonna smoke a little ganja with us, and then it's gonna be a good night. It's gonna be a good night.
All right.
Excellent.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Good night.